Alright, so in this level, I'm back in my level 01, the third person sort of game that we're developing. And what I'd like to do is maybe even put in a pause option. But that would happen in game and not on the main menu, because in the main menu you're obviously starting the game or quitting it. Now if we go to our edit, project settings, you'll see down here there's input. Now what this is for is you can see access mapping and action mapping. If I expand this, you could see that these are all of the keys where it's like if you have the Oculus Touch, thumbstick, all this other stuff, which would you could use to move around or move forward, right? WS. This is set to a negative value, so that's why a character walks backwards, even though it says move forward. And these values get called as events or so forth in our game. Under action mapping here, we only have two buttons, jump and this reset VR. Now what I'd like to do is create another action map here and map it to a certain key. So what I think I'm going to do is just I'll hit this plus sign, and then in here we can type in a custom name. So what I'd like to do is type in pause, and here we can map it to a key or a touch or a button event. And if we want to add more, you can just click this plus sign and you can attach it to multiple, like say I want the Oculus Touch I don't know, like right grip or something to pause it, or left trigger or what have you. And if I don't want it, I can always delete it. So if I click in here, and you can see there's a search, if I hit a capital P, you might be like, well, where's the P key? The problem is it circles through everything that has a P in it until you get to P here. Now what's interesting is it'll actually say P for pause, which is interesting because you might have a pause break button on your keyboard. You want this P key here. So unless you want it to be mapped to the pause button on your keyboard, P probably makes a little bit better sense just because it's similar to some of the other games that are out there. Now you don't have to save this, it automatically saves, so once I close that, it's saved. If I was to play it now, it would obviously do nothing. And the reason I'm always talking about it doing nothing in the videos is quite often we get afraid when we create new things inside of Unreal or Blueprints. You have to understand that sometimes you create a node or you make an input key and it literally is just sitting there living. It doesn't have necessarily break your game or whatever. So trying to help remove some of the anxiety of this game development. Now, I don't want to create a pause menu or fire off that pause event in the level blueprint. What I'd like to do is always have it attached to something that's always living in the scene. Now these guys disappear. I could create an extra blueprint and just sort of set it off to the side, but that creates another blueprint in our scene. We're kind of making it a little bloated. I'm actually just going to throw it on top of this third person character here. So I'm just going to add it here. And we've got all these little guys collected here. Now if I right click in here and I just start typing the word pause, you're going to see action events pause. This is the paused press event that we created earlier, like in our input mapping. So I'm just going to press the C like cat key, and then I'm going to write pause this game here so that whoever looks at our code later knows that this is our pause game event. Now what I'd like to do is when I press the P key, it creates a widget. So I'm going to type in create widget. Now the first thing that probably came to mind to you is, well, we never created a pause menu widget. If I was to press P now, it would open up my UI main menu or this other HUD. So what I can do is, even though the main menu widget, and this is pretty cool, exists in its own level, if I select it here as our UI main menu, I can actually make it appear when I press P. So let me go ahead and compile and save this. And we want to add this to viewport, so let's go ahead and type in add, and you'll see add to viewport. And let's do compile and save. I'm just going to bring this down for a second and press play in our game, hit save selected. And actually what I want to do is I'd like to do it in editor. Let's press play again. Let's see. Oh, selected viewport rather. Let's stop. Okay, now I'm going to press play. Now if I press P, you can see it gives us our start game. There's a couple things going on here though. my arrow is not selectable inside of here, and you can see that it appears on top of it. So, and we don't have a pause menu. So we're going to fix all of that stuff. So I'm just going to hit escape. But we can see though, which is really neat, is that actually works. Like that little bit of code is actually creating a little menu. Now there's a couple things we can do here. We can set it so our input mode, which is the mouse input, right? We can set our input mode to UI only. That means we only interact with our input. Another thing is, right, notice that our mouse cursor was not showing up. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to type in player controller, because our mouse cursor is actually attached to our player controller for movement. So let's get our player controller, and there it is, get player controller. And I'm going to attach this to the player controller class here. And let's keep expanding this out a little bit. And then what I'd like to do is I want to show the mouse cursor. So I'm going to drag this out and I'm going to start typing mouse cursor. And you could see set mouse cursor. So if I click on that, you can see, oh, actually, that's mouse position. We want to do set mouse cursor. Actually, I'm sorry, I want to do not set mouse cursor, I want to do show. There we go. I want to set the mouse cursor here, so where it says show mouse cursor. This will allow us to see our mouse cursor, right, whether it's checked on or off. And then let's check that on, and then we want to, right now with these nodes, as you remember, this doesn't activate unless we run it through, because this is our as it runs through these guys here, what it's doing is that sort of runs our code, right? So I'm going to compile and save that, and now when I press play and I press P, we should see it, and we can see we have our mouse controller here. Now if I press WASD here, there's nothing going on in the background, so I can, you know, there's start game, quit game, or whatever, where we kind of restarted the level essentially. Alright, so but that actually doesn't pause the game. I don't know if you noticed that, like when this was playing, this rotating guy, when I press P, it's actually still rotating, right? So it's not actually paused. So it's really easy to actually pause the game. So over here under set, I'm just going to type in game paused, and you could see set game paused. Alright, let's compile and save this. So when I press play now and I hit P, notice that didn't work. Let's see what's going on here. We have, oh, this isn't checked on. We have to make sure we check that on for paused. Now when I press P, you can see that little guy isn't moving. There's another problem with this, and that's like we actually want it to hide that menu, right? Like right now, when we press P, we're kind of trapped. So remember we have this pressed, so when we press P, it runs through this thing. Well, I don't think we want to set the input mode to the only UI. And what we want to do is, I'm going to delete this, drag this out, is there's actually a set game mode, and it says game and UI. And this will encompass both the game and the UI, the user interface. Alright, so let's hook this up and compile and save this. Now this video is kind of hitting a little bit longer, the 10-minute mark. So if I hit P here, you'll see everything is paused. If I hit P again, really what's happening is you'll notice that this is getting a little thicker in here, and that's because every time I press P, it's creating a new widget on top of it. In the next video, we'll take a look at cleaning this up and getting it so that we can exit our UI.